Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg won't oppose delaying sentencing in the hush money case involving Donald Trump. The former president was convicted on 34 felony counts related to the cover-up of a sex scandal in 2016 when Trump was a candidate for president. The Supreme Court just granted broad immunity to presidents while they're in office, and now Trump's lawyers are seeking to have the hush money case overturned. Legal and court reporter Zach Schonfeld joining us to discuss. Zach, what is the argument from Trump's lawyers?
The argument here is a bit different than the other criminal cases of Trump's that have not yet gone to trial. In those cases where he actually argues he's just totally immune from the entire case and the actual charges, in the hush money case, he hasn't argued that he's actually immune from the 34 counts of falsifying business records. Instead, what he argues is during that blockbuster 6-week trial, at different periods, prosecutors were introducing pieces of evidence that are covered under the Supreme Court's new immunity test. So, for example, one of the things is they introduced President Trump's call records when he was in the White House. He says that's official conduct that should not have been allowed to be shown to the jury. So he says because the jury was allowed to see that evidence before they delivered their guilty verdict, that verdict cannot stand.
Now, sentencing was set for July 11th, but now it looks like that might not happen. What's the latest on the timeline?
It really does seem that we are headed for a delay. So after the Supreme Court's ruling, it's been a whirlwind, 24 hours or so, Trump's lawyers saying they wanted to bring up this immunity defense. And then today, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's office sent a letter back saying that they do not oppose delaying Trump's scheduled July 11 sentencing until all of this gets sorted out. Now, that being said, the DA's office, they're making clear they don't believe Trump's immunity defense here has any merit. They believe it should be rejected, but they have conceded that he should be given an opportunity to make this argument. So it seems that we are headed for a delay, assuming the judge approves this. Based on the proposed briefing schedules that have been flying around, it seems that we're talking at least until the end of July, potentially even into August.
Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor of New York and former personal lawyer to President Trump, has been disbarred in New York. The decision comes from a panel of appellate judges in the state. What did the appellate judges say?
They said that Rudy Giuliani had flagrantly misused his position as attorney when he represented former President Trump following the 2020 election, when he and a team of other people had filed dozens of lawsuits across the country, when they were, going out at press conferences, making all of these baseless claims of mass election fraud in 2020. So this panel of appeals judges saying that because of that, Rudy Giuliani can no longer practice law. They are disbarring him. Now, this has no immediate practical effect for Rudy Giuliani. His law license has been suspended since 2021 as these proceedings were underway. And of course, he's not really exactly these days trying to be anyone's lawyer. So no practical effect for him, but it certainly is a legal and a symbolic defeat for him. And his team has called this a political decision, and they're vowing to appeal.
We also got some new Supreme Court rulings today. First, let's talk about what the court said in that Illinois gun case. This involves a ban in that state on assault-style rifles and high-capacity magazines.
Yeah, this was in the Supreme Court's final order list before they went out on their summer recess. So now that they've gotten immunity and all the other big opinions done for the term and they're getting ready to head out for the summer, they had one last batch of petitions to take up cases that they needed to decide whether they were going to take them up for their next term or deny them and let lower rulings stand. So in this case, these challenges to Illinois' law that blocks semi-automatic weapons as well as high-capacity magazines, as well as a few local ordinances in the state that are very similar, the Supreme Court not getting involved and letting that lower ruling stand. But what we saw is Justice Thomas, he wrote separately to say that these cases right now are just in a preliminary posture. But he made clear that one day they could come back to the Supreme Court, and at that time, he won't be afraid to take it up.
And the court also declined to take up a case that would have gutted the ability of OSHA to regulate workplace environments. Tell us about that case.
Yeah, this was a case, if they had taken it up, really would have been another big battle over what has been described as the administrative state, this growing size of the federal bureaucracy. So the argument here is that because OSHA has such broad authority to regulate workplace standards and go and enforce those standards and just issue a whole host of regulations, the argument here was that Congress, when they set up OSHA, had actually improperly and unconstitutionally given away its legislative power to this federal agency in the executive branch, that they had delegated their power away. Now, lower courts had all rejected those challengers' arguments, and the Supreme Court today declining to take up their appeal. So OSHA does seem safe. That being said, again, Justice Clarence Thomas did write separately when this order came down to stress that he thought that they should have taken this up, and he was expressing concerns about OSHA's constitutionality. But of course, no one other justice joined his opinion, so he's just one, and it takes 4 votes to take up a case.
All right, Zach Schonfeld, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Breaking today, the first sitting Democrat has called on President Biden to step down from the 2024 presidential election. Texas Democratic Congressman Lloyd Doggett released a statement today urging the president to withdraw from the race after his poor performance at last week's debate. President Biden has been facing increasing scrutiny after the debate, with Democrats behind the scenes pressuring his campaign to consider dropping out. But today marks the first time a sitting Democrat has publicly called for him to withdraw. White House correspondent Alex Gangitano joins us to discuss. Alex, this is a major development for a sitting Democrat to call on Biden to step down. Do you think these calls will continue to grow?
Yeah, this is definitely a big development. Until now, we only saw Democratic operatives, pundits, former aides to, the Obama administration, the Clinton administration, adding to these calls. But now that there's a sitting member of the House, I think more people might feel emboldened. We've already seen some members, including Senator Peter Welch this week, saying that the campaign shouldn't be so dismissive of concerns, not quite going as far as calling for him to step down. But it seems like there's a lot of growing frustration among some sitting lawmakers about the campaign dismissing concerns that they have about the president's, fitness for office after his poor performance in the debate. So I think now some might feel emboldened that we're just going to see this list continue to get larger and larger, and that the president will have to address it at some point or, rethink steps here.
Now, other Democrats are urging the Biden campaign to shift course after that disastrous debate performance. There's been frustration over the campaign's attempts to kind of gloss over his performance. Tell me about that.
That's right. So, the campaign sent the president out on Friday, the day after the debate, for a big rally in North Carolina. And he spoke very energetically. It was a much stronger performance than what we saw on the stage on Thursday night. So the campaign's been pointing to that, saying, look, he can be energetic. He can rally a crowd. This is the Biden who you would be electing. Meanwhile, they're dismissing concerns, or that what I've heard talking to sources is that they feel the campaign has been dismissing concerns that everybody saw what we saw on Thursday night, and it's hard to just move past that. So part of it is, what do they do next? Does the president give more speeches unscripted? Does the president talk more to reporters like me and take questions off the cuff? How can they make people feel better that he's at the top of the ticket? And how can they try to squash these calls for him to step down if that's not, their plan? And as far as we've heard from the White House, from the campaign, he's not going anywhere.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about doing some big interview or series of interviews, as you said, unscripted. There's obviously comes some risk with that. Is that something that is actually being considered by the Biden campaign?
It's a very good question. We've been pressuring them to answer these questions over can he talk to the media more? This even happened before the debate. Wanting more talk Q&As with the media, more conversations that are unscripted. But now those are only going to increase. When in the lead up to the debate, I remember people talking to me about how great he was during the State of the Union address, when he did come across as very energetic. Well, those are scripted events. And so when he, doesn't come off as energetic or fit, necessarily, some argue not fit for office during the debate, the only way to combat that is to have him go out there more often. We saw actually Senator Chris Coons, who's a really fierce Biden loyalist, say they need to do some more unscripted events. But I really haven't seen any change in strategy and the campaign or the White House wanting to put him out there more. On a Monday evening, he gave a speech following the Supreme Court's immunity decision. And, that would have maybe been an opportunity for him to take some questions from reporters and show, that he wants to do that more often. But he spoke for 5 minutes and then he left the room. So I haven't seen a change just yet. And that's indicative of them keeping on his plan of just, giving speeches and not talking to the media.
Yeah, and Republicans are trying to capitalize on Biden's debate performance to attack vulnerable Democrats in races across the country. What's the message coming from Republicans?
Yeah, I think anytime, Democrats are in disarray here, that's something the Republicans are going to monopolize on. And of course, it's going to be huge for them now that, as we were talking about, a House Democrat has said that the president should step aside. The Republicans are going to hit the campaign trail this weekend for the next, few months and say, Democrats don't even trust the guy at the top of their ticket. You should vote Republican up and down the ballot. And I think that argument is something that could resonate with Americans after we've seen polling come out that people don't think that Biden's fit for another 4 years in office. We also, while I've been reporting out these stories after the debate, have been talking to folks about how this could affect down ballot Democrats, in the fight to keep the Senate or flip the House. Will we see Democrats wanting to maybe distance themselves from Biden or not campaign with the president in order to help their chances of winning re-election? And as more of that goes on, Republicans are just going to make voters very aware of that and try to use that in their favor.
And despite Biden and his team insisting that he is going to stay in the race, names of high-profile Democrats are being floated as possible replacements. Who are they, and how are they actually responding to their names being put out there like this?
Yeah, so of course we have Vice President Harris. She's been a fierce defender and supporter of the president. So, any kind of mention, we've seen her team shut down. She came out right after the debate and was on CNN for an interview, and she really staunchly defended him. We also, have heard from operatives floating the names of Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, Governor Gavin Newsom of California. Both of them have been supporters and defenders of Biden and have definitely made it clear that they're not trying to get on this ticket as opposed to him. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, of course, made waves in 2020 when he ran for the Democratic nomination against Biden. He is, of course, fiercely loyal to the president as a member of his cabinet. I don't think we're going to see anything otherwise from him. So it definitely would be, an outlier coming in and saying, you know what, I'm going to decide to take my chances and see, if people will, if they have, a person to back, if that will help Biden from dropping out. But, while I've been talking to folks for over the last few days, people think that the Democratic Party is really stacked with future talent. Some of these people that I just named, and a lot of other governors, senators, Raphael Warnock from Georgia here, Jared Polis from Colorado, Governor, a lot of other names. And so, Democrats are really saying there could be a chance that someone else could take on Trump successfully because we have a lot of people. But, who's willing to do that is the big question.
A New York Democratic congressman says he will introduce a constitutional amendment to reverse the Supreme Court's decision regarding presidential immunity. This makes for a good social media post, but practically it would be a long shot, to say the least, right?
That's right. Definitely would be a long shot. This amendment idea is an interesting one. And basically, he's saying that my amendment would prioritize democracy while the Supreme Court did not do that. He's definitely agreeing with the three liberal dissenters in the case, saying that this could be on the path of creating kings and that there'd be virtually no limits on the Supreme Court justices. But like you said, it's definitely a long shot. It's something, that always gets floated after big decisions like this of how can we kind of overrule the Supreme Court. So I don't see that going anywhere, but it definitely speaks to Democrats' frustrations about this. And they also want to keep it in the news cycle because this might be a strategy also to kind of make voters fearful of what could happen in a next Trump administration without any safeguards around him and with this immunity protecting him.
And speaking of long shots, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says she's planning to file articles of impeachment for Supreme Court justices over this ruling. Who's she targeting?
Yeah, so she hasn't been specific, interestingly, about who exactly. She said at least one justice deserves to be impeached here. She also warned against, what they did creates us, puts the U.S. on a path towards tyranny. She also, warned against this idea of kings that we heard from the dissenters. And so, we could see her try to, put forward, file an article of impeachment. But of course, that going anywhere is also a very long shot. But it also, as I said before, speaks to Democrats' just frustrations with the situation and trying to do something about it, but also trying to keep it in the news cycle as a warning to voters.
And Republicans are using these type of responses to rib Democrats. Congressman Jim Jordan, who often spars with Democrats as chair of the House Judiciary Committee, urging Democrats to respect democratic norms in their responses to the rulings. Alex, that's usually a refrain we hear from Democrats.
That's right. We hear that a lot from Democrats on the campaign trail saying, democracy is at stake every time Trump talks about how his court cases are rigged. That's an attack on democratic norms. Now we're seeing it on the other side, and Jordan bringing that up in the case of Democrats. Interestingly, we saw the president just last night when he was talking about this immunity decision, kind of attacking the Supreme Court and saying that they've done things in recent years that have been, attacks on precedents, and of course alluded to them overturning Roe v. Wade. And so him, saying that the Supreme Court was wrong here, and that, this is a politicized situation, definitely undermines or attempts to undermine some of their credibility there. And as you mentioned, that's something that we often see Republicans doing with lower court systems or whatever else. So the tables have kind of turned here. We'll see if it becomes a Democratic talking point or if they, try to give the Supreme Court a little more, distance and not attack them as much. But for right now, they're definitely going after the justices, which has been an interesting change. As you mentioned, Republicans in the past were the party to more likely be doing that.
A new poll shows 72% of voters have made up their minds on who they're going to vote for in the presidential election. That's up just a few points from the results on the same question in May. Now, to me, that's a surprisingly large number of undecideds. What's your take, Alex?
Yeah, it does feel like a large number of undecideds because right now, we have two men running for president who are the most popular men in this country in terms of everybody knows everything about them. They might not be popular in terms of people wanting them to be the next president, but everybody knows everything about these two. And so I think it's not surprising that a lot of people have made up their mind. And it speaks to the polarization in this country that there are people that are going to vote for Donald Trump just because they hate Joe Biden. And there's going to be people that vote for Joe Biden just because they can't stand Donald Trump. And not actually because they're excited about the nominee. But the undecided, of course, any number of undecided is exciting for both of these campaigns because that's the people that they've been targeting since day one. And the fact that, the undecideds haven't all just joined the Trump camp after seeing the president's debate performance is good news for the Biden campaign. But we'll see if that number continues to decrease as, maybe more calls for Biden to step down or as, people maybe listen to Democrats talking about how this immunity case should make them afraid of Trump. All these factors could, there's always the idea that, one independent is going to decide, okay, that's it. I'm voting for Biden or Trump after X, Y, and Z happened. So, as time goes on, I think that number is obviously going to decrease, but the campaigns are in full mode of courting these undecided voters.
All right, that's all I got. Alex Gangitano, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
A federal appeals court ruled over the weekend that part of President Biden's student loan relief program can continue. The 10th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals lifted an injunction on the program while legal challenges continue to work their way through the courts. Republican-led states have fought to block the Biden administration's loan relief plan, which currently has 8 million enrollees. The program aims to reduce payments for borrowers and tie monthly payment amounts to income and household size. Last week, 2 judges in Kansas and Missouri issued separate preliminary injunctions. The Kansas order had suspended parts of the program that were not yet in effect, but would decrease monthly payments for borrowers with undergraduate debt. In Missouri, the court's injunction blocked new debt cancellation through the program. But in a win for the Biden administration, the latest appeals court ruling has lifted the Kansas District Court's injunction, allowing for the program to move forward. The Missouri injunction blocking certain loan cancellations will stay in place. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Drew Petrimoulx. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hill's YouTube channel, and come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.